I'm Steve Van Order.
And I'm Kurtis Warne.
DIY AMP EFI AutoTune, and today we're going to cover why you need a standalone.
So today we're kind of going over the reasons why we need a standalone unit. What are the kind of the purposes for it, the reasons why we actually are doing what we kind of do. So I'm going to kind of go over a couple different scenarios and everything with Steve and kind of have him bring some context to kind of what we do. So Steve, so on the kind of general tuning type pieces, can you kind of explain what engine tuning entails and why it's important to the automotive performance?
Okay, big topic. So tuning entails getting your fuel trims and ignition advance correct for the condition in which the vehicle is in. So if you've got, let's use a Fox body for an example. You've got typical, 87, 93 Fox body, and it's heavily modded. Big cam, head cam intake. Sometimes the factory computer gets really upset. It's, that's old school tuning where you choose the correct mass airflow unit for the injector size and, piggyback. And those ECUs are getting old. They're getting old. You see a lot of failures of capacitors and whatnot. So swapping in like one of our plug and plays into a Fox body gives you infinite tuning of idle, cruise, wide open throttle tuning, just to name a few things. It really opens up a large window of availability for functionality.
Awesome. Now, how does kind of the tuning process help with the engine longevity or the actual fuel economy or any kind of just overall performance in general?
Oh, I mean, huge. So in general, being able to choose your AFR targets, whether you're on gasoline, E85, if you're on methanol, we don't care about economy. But generally speaking, let's put it into context. Let's say we're doing endurance racing, right? Because we plan on getting into endurance racing this year, hopefully. It's not all about making power. You do need power to be able to, get out there and make sure you're positioned well. Well, after that, you need economy. You need to be able to stay out on track for 2 hours. And being able to lean the engine out, and when you lean the engine out, your fuel burn is going to be a bit slower, so we can then add more ignition advance to compensate. It allows us to tune for maximum efficiency at part and wide open throttle. Wide open throttle, we have to be a lot more careful about lean conditions, but you get the idea. It gives us maximum flexibility for the project at hand.
Now, with that all being said, how does that kind of help in regards to using one of our engine management systems compared to kind of the OE systems that are out there?
So it depends on what generation we're talking about, right? So if we're talking about something from the late 80s, early 90s, all the way up through the mid 2000s, it's a night and day difference. You have to chip those ECUs or, flash them, and the tuning process is a lot harder. There's a lot more room for error. But don't get me wrong, there's room for error no matter what engine management system that you're using. But you have a lot more flexibility and control with, say, an MS3 Pro, standalone. You also have, a host of features that make the process much simpler. These older chipped ECUs, you cannot really do a lot of live tuning. You make a change, see how it did, make another change, reflash it. With a MS3 Pro standalone, you can tune all of it live. So it's a big step up.
Now, in that kind of tuning process, I'm assuming the big kind of essential steps that we're kind of working toward is trying to be able to have some of those other advanced type features. Launch control, boost control, a lot of those things. I'm assuming a lot of that stuff is not available in those OE systems.
It depends on the system. Some of them can be manipulated in ways that are unintended, and depending on the software you're using, sometimes those do have availability. A lot of them don't, especially when you want a feature to function a very specific way. So we have an incredibly long feature list available to the user, no matter what kind of racing they're doing, whether it's going to be drag racing, drifting, road course racing. We have a host of features that are available with a lot of customization available to the end user. And there's more than one way to get the job done. So it's not just boost control. There's dome control. There's multiple boost strategies. There's more than one boost output. So it's everything from basic to wild you get to customize.
Now with that, if you kind of pick some of the essential steps, what would be some of those things that you would kind of advocate to somebody saying, hey, if you're starting with this, what would be the kind of first things that you would tell them to kind of tackle?
All right, that's a list, and probably longer than we have for this particular interview. But I'm going to hit the big four, okay? So fuel. And when I say fuel's going to include making sure your injector settings are right. And then once that's done, you're going to get into tuning your VE table, right? Your VE table is your volumetric efficiency table, and that's going to be your main fuel trim table. Ignition advance, whether it's idle advance or your main ignition table, that's where we go to, adjust the spark advance for the engine. It depends on which tuning strategy you're using for how you would go about it. But that's where you're going to spend some time to optimize the engine. Most of the time, you're going to set the ignition table up, and unless there's a reason to touch it, you don't touch it unless the car's, say, on the dyno. Startup idle settings. That's another big one. Big subject. But, if you want the car to start well, and you want a appropriate return to idle and good manners, even for your giant cam stroker motor, you spend some time in the idle settings. Depending on how thorough you are, you can make that happen. And the final one there is going to be acceleration enrichment. A lot of people overlook acceleration enrichment, and they wonder why they have a soggy pedal when they're, tuning on their car or they're, for tip-in. Acceleration enrichment is one of those things where until the fuel table is fully tuned out and dialed in, acceleration enrichment, really just tune it by feel. That's the best advice I can give for the novice when you're beginning is, don't drown the engine with fuel. Move acceleration enrichment around and play with it. You want a nice, crisp throttle response. What I find when I'm helping a lot of users is that you have two groups. You have the guys that way under fuel the engine on tip-in, and then you have the group that over fuels the engine on tip-in, and too much fuel acts just like not enough. The engine's going to be real soggy and sad. Those are like the main four areas that you would focus on almost any build, assuming that we're, not doing something crazy like a 2,500 horsepower, methanol breathing monster. Then that's a completely different conversation.
So kind of when we get a lot of these kind of technical calls, or somebody's calling in asking questions in regards to, do I need an ECU? What are kind of the recommendation type pieces? What are the kind of the common reasonings that you would probably provide to somebody of why you would look for something along these lines over something maybe OE?
Flexibility.
Okay.
Flexibility and ease of use. Everything looks scary and daunting when you first get started, right? So it's familiarization. any new user to a product should take the time to familiarize themselves with the software that they're going to use, regardless of the system that they're going to tune. Flexibility and the ability to get in and really adjust any and every parameter is incredibly important. Let me give you an example. We had a car in here a few months ago, and it had some really bad tip-in problems. I mean, just terrible tip-in issues. Really couldn't figure it out. And once I got it on the dyno and I started working with it, it made tons of power, 2JZ car. Now the 2JZ, when done in sequential, is incredibly picky. I guess picky's not really the term I want to use here, but we'll use picky. It's very sensitive to changes in injection timing. So by being able to manipulate at what crank angle the injector fires, I was able to really dial in the idle and acceleration enrichments. He was very close on most of his settings, but he never even considered modifying the injector angle from the base injector angle. And by manipulating that, it made the car, the engine was completely different when that vehicle left. It was nice and crisp with a solid idle.
Perfect. Well, is there any kind of other tidbits that you can kind of see that you would probably provide to somebody? I know a lot of times I get commentary in regards to, do I look at a wire in, do I look at plug and plays? But it seems like a lot of our different calls we get kind of lean toward more of the plug and play style. Is there reasons why that a lot of people really lean toward that one style versus another?
Well, for a lot of users, it's their first time getting into a project. A plug and play makes things fairly easy. I'll just give you an example. The 0304 Cobra, okay? Everyone wants to mod their Cobra. Everyone wants to go fast and make good power. By having a plug and play, they're able to do tasteful mods to the vehicle, and when they go racing, they're able to install their MS3 Pro plug and play and get that infinite level of tunability, especially if they've done an E85 conversion, flex fuel, a number of those items. We have some customers that have been very, very, very successful in racing with our plug and play ECUs. And it's easily reversible. You don't have a hacked up harness. The vehicle doesn't necessarily lose any resale value because the plug and play can be removed and the factory ECU be put back on. Cobras obviously hold their value. It's a sought after vehicle. Wire ends tend to be used when individuals are getting to that next level of their project, or they want to, or the wiring harness is in such a state that there's no point in using a plug and play. A wire end gives someone the flexibility to do what they need to do to get that car to the point where they want it. Especially like someone using our new Evo Plus. They've got a lot of inputs available to them, and if they make their own harness for their race car, they're able to utilize a lot of instrumentation, extra sensors, to really data acquisition is what allows you to go faster, right? Especially when you're limited by class options. But they don't limit you on instrumentation. And more data you have, more power you have in your hands.
Now, I'm assuming a lot of the plug and play ones still allow that same kind of flexibility?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, for instance, we'll just stay on that vein of the Cobra, right? So our ECUs have an options port connector on the back. So obviously we've optioned it out to utilize the factory harness for the engine. But if a user wants to do traction control or wire in extra instrumentation, say they're in a drag race application with that vehicle and they want to do ride height sensors or track temperature sensor or travel sensors, whatever they may want to put on there, they have the flexibility to wire that into that options port on the back of the ECU to bring in all of those extra inputs. That allows you to start with a plug and play and then grow without having to replace the factory harness.
Now, I know we talked about a lot of the concerns and type pieces on that, and in that same kind of vein, so to speak, out of it, I'm assuming that a lot of times we go through, as we can kind of see, dyno testing and all the kind of the behind the scenes stuff that we do, that we're wanting to kind of showcase more of those pieces. But a lot of the questions I get out of it is like, so if I plug this thing in, will it turn on? Is it one of those things that we can fire the car up on it in most cases out of it? But kind of the feel or vein out of that kind of particular piece as well.
So it really depends on how modified the vehicle is. There are a number of steps that a user really needs to cover before they even attempt, before they attempt to start the vehicle. If you plug in, say, a plug-and-play ECU, and you were gracious enough to bring your 03 Cobra in and allow me to put it on the dyno and use it for the new bass tune that we have releasing for the Cobra. And that tune is, as you know, very comprehensive. But it's for a stock Cobra with an Eaton and stock injectors and stock return style fuel system. And it's dialed in for that stock engine. So if you've swapped on a Whipple and you got 25 pounds of boost, yes, I have a safe ignition table in the tune. No, I have no idea what 25 pounds of boost is going to do on E85 because we did not tune for that. We didn't tune for a cam change. We didn't tune for bigger injectors. However, as long as you go through and you do your basic, we've been working on that write-up, 10 steps before startup, that, we're going to be releasing here soon. Your required fuel. You update your required fuel for your injector size. You input your updated injector settings. We put together the spreadsheet for injector setting update. Very, very easy to use. We have a full write-up for that on the technical articles page now. You go through and just each one of those items, you go through and check. And you make sure the tune is set up appropriately for the modifications you've done. If you do that, and the engine will start as long as you go through and you appropriately modify those settings. You cannot expect a tune for 39-pound injectors to work if you with a returnless fuel system. If now you've got a 4 return style fuel system and 1600 cc injectors and E85, the car's not gonna, if it runs, it's gonna run terribly because the tune has not been set up for that. So you have to go through and set up those basics if you want to be successful. And I think that's where a lot of beginners, especially, they make that mistake is they just, they throw a bass tune meant for a stock vehicle onto a modified vehicle and they expect it to start. As long as you go through and you appropriately modify for the modifications you've done, you'll be successful with the bass tune that we've provided.
Perfect.
Got any other questions for me?
That's it.
That's it?
That's kind of the main ones.
All right. Well, guys, if there's anything that else you want us to cover, whether that's tuning related or otherwise, please reach out, like, subscribe, and let us know. Give us some feedback so we can put out content that you want to see. Thanks for joining in.